Warning, this fic contains many dark and adult themes. For the full list provided by the author, please check the description below and proceed with caution. Welcome back, this is Falling for You by 1967 Hogwarts Goddess, a Percy Jackson fanfic. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's get started. Chapter 67. Percy XLAI. Percy lifted his arm, dragging it upwards with a furrow of his brow. It felt like it was full of sand and his head swam with thoughts. Why was his arm so heavy? The skin he could see was filthy and covered in cuts and watercolor bruises. His eyes followed the manacle on his shredded wrist to the chain swinging through the air, the other end embedded in the rock wall behind him. The stone loomed before his eyes. The cave. No, he whispered to himself. He looked around. He was sat on the ground. Small splatters of his blood were smeared around him. Koyos and Krios sat on the other side of the cave, staring at him, their faces blurry like heat rising off hot tarmac. Jackson, Krios said, but his voice was distorted. It echoed in his head. Did his lips even move? Percy shook his head slowly. His tongue felt heavy in his mouth. I got out, he murmured. The words didn't sound real. Koyo stood up across from him. Percy couldn't see his face, couldn't get his eyes to focus, but he knew he was smiling at him. A numbness settled over him. No, he said and began to step over to Percy. You never left. No, I know, he said, pushing himself backwards on his hands. He could barely move. It was like he was crawling through a thick syrup. Why couldn't he go faster? What was wrong with him? Why was he going so slow? Koyos was right there. His palms fell uselessly against the ground and Percy strained as hard as he could, but didn't get any further. No, he shouted. It came out quiet and barely audible. His throat wasn't working. His body wasn't responding to what he was screaming at it to do. He was going to tear his arms off if he pulled at the chains any harder, but he didn't care. Koyos reached for him. He flinched. Percy's eyes snapped open, his heart thundering in his chest so hard he felt his body twitching. He moved without thinking, jerking over and tumbling out of bed. The floor slammed into his face. He pushed himself up, staggering. Riptide elongated instantly in his hands. For a second, all he could hear were his loud pants in the cabin. Then, Percy. Annabeth was propped up on an elbow in bed, her blonde curls messy and stuck to her chin. She looked at him with a surprising amount of calm on her face. Whatever you dreamed, Percy, she said patiently, it either wasn't real or has already happened. Neither of those things can hurt you now. He nodded once, then again. Yeah. He was in his room. Dream. Nightmare. Wasn't real, well, anymore, wasn't real now. He was fine, everything was fine. Everything was fine. It took him a solid minute to lower his sword from actively up and ready to at ease. Annabeth waited without a word. A long breath blew out of his puffed cheeks as he sank into a crouch and placed it on the floor. The feeling of it leaving his hand defenseless and empty was horrible and he hated it. He hated it so much. He twitched in an aborted effort to pick it back up. Why was talking so difficult? It'll just return to my pocket, he said vaguely. Not if you stay close to it, right? Annabeth said. He nodded again and shivered. His skin felt drenched like he'd been stood in the shower for a couple seconds. His face flushed a deep red. He hadn't wet himself, had he? No, he rubbed a hand up his damp arm, looking himself over. It was just sweat. A lot of it. He was sweating buckets. He rubbed his brow and breathed. I'm just gonna, he gestured at the door and slowly slid down against the wall, his heartbeat thundering in his ears, not taking his eyes off it. Can you? He vaguely pointed at the window. Yeah, Annabeth shrugged, pulling the duvet around her shoulders and sliding down next to him, staring at the window. She too was only in her underwear. Course. He nodded gratefully. He wanted to look at her, thank her, but just kept staring. He felt gripped by something he couldn't pinpoint. Hand, she offered, holding it up in his peripheral vision. But he shook his head. Hands free, he got out. He was talking like a caveman but didn't care if he spoke he might miss something. A noise, footsteps, a snarl. She acquiesced silently. He appreciated it. It was light outside. He realized he'd slept through most of the night even though it didn't feel like it. The birds, cyclopes, were chirping in the trees. It was cool, white-hot, and crisp, just gone dawn. Time didn't exist. Dew lined his windows, blood. He couldn't remember if he'd locked the door or not. It ate away at him in his stomach, but he didn't dare move to check. They sat there quietly for a while. The sweat on his skin was cold, and that actually helped him a little, making him glad to not be feeling too hot. Thick, muggy air only reminded him of one thing. In the tense atmosphere, Percy began to wish that Annabeth would talk, that she would break the silence he was too afraid to. He swallowed. Jerkily, he offered his hand, and she took it gently. "This isn't your fault," she told him quietly, and just like that, Percy felt some of the tension drain out of him. "Yeah," he breathed, relieved at finally being able to talk. "Yeah, I know, Annabeth, I'm s. "You'd do the same for me," she interrupted him. "I love you, but you need to listen. This isn't on you. You have PTSD, Percy. It's not going to go away overnight." "Wish it would," he mumbled, sinking back against the wall like he'd just ran a marathon. His back, having just been ramrod straight and stiff, cracked loudly. It nearly set him off again. "Me too," he heard Annabeth murmur, and for a second he felt horrible before he realized she was talking about her own trauma. In only his boxers he could see all the scars standing out against his skin. He ran a fingertip over a few of them, finally settling on the long one over his eye. He'd got that after, he was certain of it, in the arena with Antaeus. He couldn't still be in the cave if he had the scar. And where was? Had been just after. He yanked at his own right arm, notably manacleless, though the livid red scabs around his wrist remained, and traced the 4 scratches that Acles had given him. They weren't deep and would most likely fade away quickly, but for now they were reassurance. His hands traveled again down to his calf, pressing his hand onto the matching outline that a dysphagia had burned onto his skin. He hadn't got those scars in the cave, he'd got them after. It didn't disturb him as much as it probably should have to categorize them like that, more weirdly comforting than anything else. He knew his own body. "Annabeth," he said quietly, "what day is it?" She blinked like she didn't know either, then looked at the clock on his wall, a furrow in her brow. She counted on her fingers. "August 18th, she settled on firmly before raising her eyebrows. "Oh," she said in surprise, "happy birthday." "Oh." Percy raised his eyebrows too. "Oh," he said, "thought I'd already missed it." "Nope, you've only been 17 for about 6 hours. 17, he let that thought bounce around in his head. He was 17 years old, about to be a senior at his high school. He'd made it to 17. It was his birthday. "I don't have a present for you." Annabeth turned big apologetic eyes on him before narrowing them. "Yet," she said with determination. "You don't have to," he told her, already knowing it was useless. "Bet," she confirmed, her gaze going distant as 1,000 ideas no doubt cycled through her brain. "What do you even want?" Percy shrugged but let it stutter to a halt. He knew what he wanted, and he almost knew how to get it. He wasn't going to put this off any longer. He couldn't. He turned to Annabeth. "Get dressed," he told her. "I want to try something." She raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure that sentence is off by 1 word, she said with a grin, but stood up all the same, offering her hand to help him up. He took it and stepped over to his drawers, pulling them open and taking out some of his clothes. Annabeth swore quietly under her breath. He looked at her questioningly. "Don't suppose you have any of my clothes in here, do you?" she asked. Percy winced and shook his head. He held out the orange camp shirt he had in his hands. "Oh, we're about to play a very dangerous game," Annabeth said, but took it with a grin. She slipped it over her head, and though she was only several inches shorter than Percy, standing at 5'9", he was quite a bit broader than she was, and the billowy fabric fell just at the top of her thighs. She held the ends out like a skirt and shook her head. Then she grinned at him. "Be right back," she said, and with quite a lot of her bare legs on show. "Keep getting changed, Jackson," his brain sounding awfully like Coach Hedge reprimanded him. Eyes down, she slipped out the front door and vanished into the early morning. Percy had no doubt that she could avoid being seen through camp, but he did question how she would fare once she made it to cabin 6. Athena's kids were nosy, he'd know. He pulled on a pair of jeans and a camp shirt. The shirt was a bigger size than he usually had, so for once, the sleeves got to remain. The trainers that he'd worn to Olympus were miraculously clean and back under his bed. He slipped on some socks, then pulled them on over. He checked Riptide was in his pocket, then again. He bit his lip for a few seconds, then checked again, just to be sure. The door clicked shut quietly behind him as he finished tying his camp necklace back around his neck, and he jerked his head around. It was just Annabeth. She was dressed in her own camp clothes, and a light smudge of pink adorned her cheeks. "Who saw you?" Percy shook his head, pretending to be disappointed. "Malcolm, in my defense I got into my cabin and almost out without any of them seeing me." She frowned a little. "I know they were probably tired, but still, if the security booby traps weren't in place, I'd be worried about their lack of awareness." "They're probably just tired," he offered. He certainly was. Maybe," she shrugged. "Anyway, what was it you wanted to do?" Percy sat down on the floor cross-legged. "I want to go see my mother," he said. Annabeth raised an eyebrow but sat across him. "I thought you said you didn't know how to shadow travel." "I don't," he confirmed. "Not really. I've only done it a couple times, and that was all just pure adrenaline. This time I'm gonna try to focus." They joined hands and Percy closed his eyes. He really needed his mother. He needed to be their home. Breathe in, breathe out. Percy cracked an eye open. Annabeth was also watching him through a half-open eye. It wasn't working. "Maybe you need adrenaline." Percy shrugged. If he thought about his nightmare, it sent tremors through his chest, but that wasn't helping at all if he was honest. "I guess I really don't know how to do it. I could try and force it." "That won't work." A new voice in the cabin had both their eyes snap open, rising to crouch on one knee. Across the room, half concealed by the shadows, Nico D'Angelo visibly braced himself. He looked like he was expecting to be attacked any second. Deep purples rested under his eyes, and Percy suspected that he had slept just as well as himself last night. "Nico," he greeted him, trying to keep his voice level so as to not scare the boy off. It seemed to unnerve him even more. Annabeth sat back down and he copied her. "Nico, neither of us blame you for what happened." Annabeth cut to the chase quickly and firmly, something Nico clearly wasn't expecting as his head whipped up. "But I felt angry when you were 10. It wasn't. You were grieving and in pain, you weren't thinking, and that's not your fault." "No, that's no excuse," Nico shook his head. "I was stupid and you died, Annabeth, you died, and I felt it. It was because of me." "But I killed the Arai," Percy said quietly. "That wasn't your fault," Nico said. "If I hadn't cursed you, that curse wouldn't have even been there to trigger." "Nico, I'm pretty sure other people have cursed him like that before," Annabeth said. "It was a coincidence." Nico looked so confused. "But you still died because of me," he protested. "I held a grudge and you paid the price. How can you not be mad at me?" "You were 10, and since then I think you've saved our lives more than you've not," Percy tried. "And Nico, you know as well as I do that holding grudges does more harm than good." He wondered how things would have gone if he had forgiven Apate, though that meant he'd probably be dead, he thought. Nico still looked disbelieving. Annabeth rolled her eyes. "Okay, fine, you want forgiveness for something that wasn't your fault. Come here and earn it. Teach Percy to shadow travel and all is behind us and forgotten." Nico blinked. Really? Gods, he sounded young, Percy thought. Nico approached them hesitantly before sitting down too. Annabeth smiled at him, but it just seemed to make him feel worse. Percy decided to keep speaking to try and move past the awkwardness that filled the room. "I've shadow traveled before, but only when panicked, never really on purpose. How do I do it?" "Oh, well, it's like a standing jump. I don't know." Nico scratched his head, clearly desperate to teach him to earn a forgiveness Percy really didn't think he needed. "You have to become one with the shadows, slip into the ether, just let go." Percy didn't know what any of that meant but nodded. It felt like maths all over again. "If you're going together, it'll drain you more," Nico told both of them. "How do I start it?" Percy asked. Nico stood up and closed the curtains, darkening the room. "Can you feel the shadows?" he asked. Percy tried to reach out for them the same way he searched for water but couldn't feel anything. Nico frowned as if he had just realized this. "You don't reach for them," he said. "Just let them reach for you, let them pull you in." Percy bit his lip uneasily. He really didn't like the sound of that. "Isn't this what your tattoo is for?" Annabeth asked, gesturing to his arm. Percy shrugged and closed his eyes, focusing on it. Oh, she was right. The skin around it and under his tattoo always burned hot, but there was something about it being in the shade that called to it, like a gateway. He leaned into it. "Good," said Nico. "You're going shadowy, but you have to remember where you're going and focus on the shadows. If you shadow travel without a destination in mind, who knows where you'll end up? A village in China knows me well." Percy snorted at that and pictured the other side of his cabin, the bunk is creating the perfect shadows in between them. He leaned into the well of darkness in his tattoo and fell out the other side, about 10 feet away from where he was sat before. "Huh," he said, feeling a little more tired. "It worked." "That was quick," Annabeth remarked. "If he's done it before, it's a lot easier to learn," Nico said. He turned hopeful eyes on the two of them. "So I taught you?" he asked. "Yes," Percy nodded, getting up and taking his former place across from Annabeth, joining hands again. "All is forgiven, though there wasn't anything to forgive in the first place. Gaia's not having the final word in this." They smiled at him, but Nico's own smile began to flicker. "You wouldn't," he began suddenly, as if a burst of confidence was carrying his words. "You wouldn't trust me if you knew what I do. You shouldn't. But I want to get this all out, all these secrets and lies. I think you should know." Annabeth and Percy exchanged a look. "Know what?" Percy asked. Nico opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked like a fish. His dark hair fell over his face as he buried his forehead into his hands, elbows resting on his knees. There were a few beats of silence as Nico seemed to gather his thoughts together. I liked you for a long time," the words seemed to tumble out of his mouth. Percy raised an eyebrow at Annabeth, but she shook her head at him. Percy frowned. He didn't know what she was saying. "You liked us?" he asked, confused. "I liked you." Nico raised his head and stared into his eyes, head held stiffly as if he was forcing himself to not look away. "I had a crush on you, Percy." Oh, Percy blinked. "Oh," he said. Annabeth held up a hand for a high five. Nico stared at it for a second before visibly letting go of the tension in his shoulders. He obligingly high-fived Annabeth. "But I'm over it now," he said firmly. He offered a weak smile to Percy with a joke. "You're not my type." "Not your type?" Percy repeated, confused. "Wait, I thought you hated me." Didn't Nico blame him for Bianca? Hadn't he tried to lock him up in the underworld once? Percy felt like he was less surprised about the liking and more about the actual liking. "What?" Nico pulled a face. "I thought I was obvious." "A little," said Annabeth. "Not at all," Percy said at the same time. "Well, it was to me. I'm done hiding it," Nico said, standing suddenly. He made a motion as if to shadow travel away, but both he and Annabeth grabbed an ankle. "Just wait," Annabeth said. "You're not leaving the camp, are you?" Nico sighed but shook his head. "I'm coming back for good this time." "You'd better," Annabeth said. "Without you, we would never have made it to the doors of death. The lift in Epirus would never have opened if you hadn't hit the button. Alcyonius wouldn't have been defeated. We need you here. And the younger campers need someone to watch out for them the same way you watched out for and helped us. Like how you helped me when Percy was down there." Nico's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Thank you for that, by the way," Percy added. Nico gave them a small smile. He looked as if he'd been carrying the world on his shoulders but had just put it down. Percy and Annabeth knew that feeling a little too well. Nico stepped back. "Tell Sally I say hi," he said. Percy smiled. "Will do." Then he took Annabeth's hands in his and fell back into the cold shadows, bringing her with him. His wardrobe in his mum and stepdad's apartment was dark, which was perfect for shadow traveling, but also small, which was less than perfect for being crammed in. With a free hand that wasn't currently being crushed under Annabeth's weight, he slid the door to the side and she rolled out across him. He crawled out after. His room was spotless, no dust in sight. Well, sure, he could see his skateboard crammed under his bed with the elbow and knee pads littered about, but other than that someone had dusted in here, kept it ready for him until he came back. Percy sniffed. Then he sniffed again. Something was cooking. He and Annabeth stood up and he gave one last look around his bedroom. Calypso's silvery moon lace flowers still bloomed outside, regularly watered it seemed. There was a stack of books he'd need for his senior year left on his blue duvet. The seashells on his shelves were now in rainbow order. He opened the door quietly, heading into the main room. On one side of the room, Paul lounged on the sofa, a book in his hand. His glasses were sliding off his nose. He looked like he was falling asleep. And on the other, "Mum," Percy's voice cracked. Dropping the baking tray to the floor with a clang, Sally Jackson whirled around. She raised her hands to her mouth. Her brown hair had flecks of flour in it. Maybe they were gray hairs, he couldn't tell. Her blue eyes locked onto his. And then he was running and she was running, but it was a small apartment so they couldn't run for long and he crashed into her and she enveloped him in what could have possibly been the best hug of his life so far. "Percy," she cried into his hair, bursting into tears. Like mother, like son. Percy's face screwed up in her shoulder, practically bent double to reach her height. Wetness dribbled through his eyelashes. "You're home," she kissed his head again and again. "Oh, I was so worried. You vanished and then we got the message about where you were and then nothing for so long. We kept hearing reports of earthquakes and freak ocean activity, which we assumed was but we weren't sure and I love you so much and I missed you. Oh, Percy." "Hi, Mum," he choked out. "I love you too. I'm okay. Everything's okay." Percy, Paul was at his side in the kitchen, now definitely awake, and gripped his shoulder comfortingly in the hug. His salt and pepper hair stuck up in every direction. Thank the gods. "Hi, Paul," Percy mumbled into his mum's shoulder. She smelled just like the cookies she was making, and had clearly been eating a few of them too, he thought questioningly, before pulling back and staring down at the suddenly visible bump on his mother's stomach. "Mum," he asked. Sally smiled shakily at him, brushing away tears from her eyes and leaving more smears of flour. Paul wrapped an arm round her shoulders. "How'd you like to be a big brother, Percy?" she asked him. His jaw dropped. "A baby?" he demanded before his face split into a wide grin. "No way. That is usually how you become a big brother, seaweed brain," Annabeth said behind him, and his mum's head shot back up again. "Annabeth," she cried, pulling her into a hug too. Percy pulled a face of amazement. Paul met his eyes. "Her hormones are a bit wild these days," Paul said with a grin too. "I can see, congratulations," Percy remembered, slapping Paul on the back. "Do you know what it'll be?" "No, we were just going to wait until the baby's born. All the stuff we've bought is yellow anyway, so it won't matter." Percy didn't know whether he'd prefer a baby brother or a baby sister. He didn't think he cared, he just wanted them to be safe and happy. His mum released a dazed but grinning Annabeth and waved them all over to the table. Sit down, I've missed you two so much. There are cookies in the oven about to come out any second, you." "Don't worry, love." Paul guided her to a kitchen chair and they all sat around the table while he remained standing. "I've got the food, you just catch up." His mum beamed at him, still a little watery, and Percy wiped his own slightly damp cheeks in turn. He even suspected he saw Annabeth do a stealthy brush of her eyes. "And happy birthday, Percy," his mum said, snapping her fingers. "Stay there." She pushed herself up and walked out of the room. Paul glanced over at him, then at the clock, and realization dawned in his eyes. "Oh yeah," he said, "happy birthday." "Thanks," Percy replied as his mother came back in, pushing 3 wrapped blue presents across the table to him. "Mum, how did you?" "A mother always knows. I had a feeling I might see you today, and they would be here for you anyway, whether you came back today or a week from now." Percy unwrapped them quickly, unveiling new stickers for his skateboard, a new fluffy blue hoodie that he saw Annabeth eyeing up and knew wouldn't be solely his for long, and a stack of CDs, some that he knew and some that he liked the look of. "Thanks guys," he said. Sally reached across the table and held out a hand to both him and Annabeth, and they returned the favor instantly. She squeezed their hands with a smile. "Oh, Sally, sorry to interrupt. Paul, you too." Paul looked over from where he was sliding cookies onto a plate as Annabeth spoke. "The name of the place that Percy went to is just referred to as the Pit now. It's a trigger for him." Percy went a little red, but nodded gratefully at her. Sally nodded in a no-nonsense kind of way. "Got it. she said, but she couldn't hide the worry in her eyes that flicked across the scar on his face, the scabs around his wrists, and the tattoo stretching across his arm. Perseus Jackson, his mum said, not taking her eyes off it, is that what I think it is? Oh no. It was a gift from the primordial goddess Nyx, he defended tiredly. It protects me. His mum nodded. She'd never been overly vocal about tattoos, but for one this size she had probably expected him to have at least talked about it with her first. And he would have if he'd got it normally. Okay, she shrugged, it's good with me then, looks cool. Percy snorted softly. Thanks mum, there's this one too. He flipped his arm over and showed her his tattoo from Camp Jupiter. SPQR, she read out loud questioningly as Paul slid a heaped plate of blue raspberry and white chocolate cookies onto the table, then sat down. Yeah, it's a long story. His mum smiled at him gently. You don't have to tell me everything, she said. What were the fun parts of your quest, at least? He nearly choked on his cookie. The fun parts, he asked. He and Annabeth shared helpless looks. Percy racked his brains to find at least a few positives for his mother. Oh, we made a ton of new friends, like a whole secret city called New Rome's worth of friends. A new Rome? Paul asked, visibly intrigued. Annabeth explained it while Percy thought some more, chewing on his cookie. He nearly felt like crying again. It was such a good cookie. It tasted like home. Awesome, Paul breathed when Annabeth mentioned the war games. And people live there, older demigods, his mum asked. Yeah, they can retire, live in houses, start families. Annabeth sounded wistful and the tip of her nose turned pink as Sally smiled at her. It sounds very nice, his mum said with a knowing look. Percy's face heated up as Paul raised an eyebrow at him but smiled to himself a little. His eyes flicked to the windows opposite as he ducked his head. They were pretty high up, but those windows looked a little too fragile for his tastes. He didn't want anything breaking in, especially if a baby was about to live here. He pulled himself back to the conversation. What were they talking about? Oh yeah, happy memories. I made friends with the Meonian Draken, he said. His mum tilted her head quizzically. A draken, she asked. Like a dragon without wings, Percy reminded her. I named her Maya, she helped me get out the pit. I see, give her my love, she replied. Oh yeah, Nico says hi by the way, Annabeth said. Bless him, she smiled. Tell him he's welcome here too. She looked him over, her smile fading a bit. You don't have to answer, but what was it like down there? Percy smiled tightly. Horrible, he said slightly shortly. Another good thing about this quest, I may or may not have yelled at the Olympian Council and now they're going to be nicer to us. His mum and stepdad blinked, then his mum sipped her tea. That's my boy, she said calmly. Like full-on yelling, Paul whispered to him. Full-on yelling, Percy whispered back in confirmation. He glanced over his shoulder just in case, and looked back as Paul whistled in awe. Nice, Paul said. Annabeth was a bit quiet, so Percy reached over and held her hand. She smiled at him. She was just as much a part of his family as he was. So the baby, Annabeth spoke up, got any names yet? A handful, Sally said, but we want it to be a surprise. The one thing you can count on is that godly names are out, Paul said. When I was a student, I'll admit, I thought naming any future children after some of the old gods would be cool, but I'm not so sure that's a good idea now that they're actually real. Maybe not, agreed Percy. His mum cocked a look in his direction and he realized he'd been tapping on the underside of the table. He winced apologetically. She pushed a cookie in his direction and he accepted it with silent acknowledgement. So what exactly was this quest about? Paul asked. You never said. Just the end of the world, Mr. Blowfies, Annabeth said through a mouthful of her own cookie. The primordial goddess Gaia tried to rise and kill everyone. Well, Percy tilted his head to the side. Technically she did rise and almost kill everyone. But we had plans. And it worked. Percy killed her so no apocalypse. Yeah, basically, he finished. His parents nodded, a little dumbfounded. I'm sorry, how do you kill? Paul asked, gesturing vaguely. Oh, Percy said, with a big sword pretty much. I built it in the pit. You built it, his mum said, sounding a bit dazed. Right. When are you due, Sally? Annabeth asked, changing the subject. March, I'm only a few months along at the moment, but I think they're a bigger baby than you were, Percy, his mum said. She put her hands on her stomach. Baby isn't big enough to kick yet, but they're certainly big enough to make me hungry. Any cravings? Paul asked eagerly, and Percy's eyes slid sideways to the book Paul had been reading. The words "what to expect when you're expecting" jumped off the front cover at him, and he grinned. His mother just looked exasperated. Paul, for the last time, I don't get cravings, it's perfectly normal. Maybe not now, but when the second trimester hits, that's when it could strike, Paul said seriously. Percy grinned. Yeah, Mum, he said, not fancying any pickles in chocolate sauce. His mother laughed. If you eat some, I'll eat some. Percy's stomach growled. He'd eaten plenty of worse things recently. Done, he said. Right, now we're definitely getting food, Paul said. I can make something, or we can order Chinese from that place round the corner. Chinese sounds good, his mum rubbed her stomach. I'm on it, Paul said, kissing her on the forehead before hurrying over to the phone. He's very excited, his mum told them fondly. We can see, Annabeth giggled. Paul took their orders quickly as they talked about what they had missed. His mum and Annabeth had a long conversation about the neighborhoods and universities in New Rome, which Percy guessed he would be attending. He wasn't sure about it yet, but Annabeth wanted to go there, saying that Harvard would be too complicated now. She looked a bit downcast about letting go of her childhood goal, but he could see her point of view. There wouldn't be much of the big gardens left once a monster set fire to them and Annabeth got kicked out for arson. At least the University of New Rome offered both architecture and marine biology. I've looked at the course and everything, Annabeth was saying passionately to his nodding mother. It sounds amazing, Sally, and everything that we get to study we can actually apply in New Rome itself, or I can apply it to Olympus. Once we get everything sorted out and get ourselves together, it should be great. Sorted out? His mother asked tactfully. Annabeth shrugged a little, dropping her gaze a little. Therapy, she said eventually. Once we get good therapy and feel better, things should be great. His mother looked concerned. She gripped Annabeth's hands tightly. Whatever you need, you too. My last book sold quite a lot. We can find you the best of the... Oh no, Sally, it's not. Reina says New Rome has its own demigod therapists, free to any member of the Legion. That means I might have to join and get the tattoo, but I'm okay with that. And they're not going to turn down Percy, he was their praetor. His mum lifted an eyebrow in confusion. Big head honcho of New Rome, Percy explained to her, but I quit after a couple of days and then we were branded war criminals or something, so I doubt I'm remembered on the best of terms. You also killed Gaia. Minor detail. The front doorbell rang and Paul, who had been staring in an enraptured silence, leapt up to go get it. His mum laughed and Percy felt warm on the inside. He's so overprotective, she said. Percy thought about Gabe. Good, he said firmly, and his mother caught his eye. She nodded and smiled. Percy knew she deserved the best out there, and he was fairly certain she'd found it in Paul. Food's here, Paul called, carrying the paper bag into the kitchen, wincing at the heat burning his fingertips. Percy stood up to help him dish up. As a son of Poseidon, heat didn't bother him as much as regular demigods, with the exception of Leo, of course, and Paul watched in awe as he held out the steaming noodle container without so much as a hiss. Percy grinned at him. Oh, and for after, Paul held up a cardboard box and slid it onto the table. His mum opened it and her eyes went misty. Oh, Paul, she said, sniffing. Percy glanced over and swallowed as he saw the blue birthday cake sat in the box. He looked at Paul, who was smiling hesitantly, almost like he was afraid he had overstepped his bounds. Thanks, man, Percy said quietly. Paul breathed a sigh of relief. No problem, Percy. The takeaway people sounded very confused when I ordered it, so I'm just glad it came out as good as it did. Percy laughed. Annabeth leaned back in her chair and rummaged through a drawer, pulling out a pack of birthday candles. She propped them up alongside the box with a sheepish smile. They dished up the rest of the food and tucked in, conversation falling silent in lieu of everyone wolfing down their food. Both he and Annabeth were starving and his mum was eating for two. Paul had said that he thought he had ordered too much, but as their dishes piled up scraped empty, his eyebrows seemed to disappear into his hairline. He looked impressed. Percy sucked a noodle into his mouth with a slurp. Across the table, his mum did the same. They narrowed eyes at each other before his mother ducked her head under the table. He saw Annabeth and Paul exchange a look across the table. His mother reappeared with a long noodle trailing out her mouth like a tail. "Mouse," she said, slightly muffled. "What mouse?" They both cracked up. It was an old joke from when Percy was a child, but they hadn't done it in years. Wide smile still splitting his face, he flicked a look at the front door. Paul had locked it, right? "You two are nuts," Paul said in amazement. "Indeed, eat your food, darling," said his mum. Percy and Annabeth grinned at each other. Percy scraped his rice together to pile it onto his fork and smiled. This was good. Olympus was fine, but those at camp and everyone he was sat with were his real family. This was who he fought for. He had definitely made the right decision to kill Gaia. Chapter 68. Epilogue. Percy had a difficult time choosing a therapist. The files Annabeth had sent him contained everything he needed to know about each therapist: their name, their age, their gender, their specialties, and a vague description on what they looked like. While some of those wouldn't affect their knowledge, it helped to find one that would be the right fit for him. Most were legacies and a few were demigods. All were capable and regularly inspected by officials in New Rome. Any of them would be a good choice. But things got complicated once he tried to imagine himself alone in a room with them. He took one look at Maureen, a kind-looking old woman, and instantly saw Gaia in disguise. Her file was gently frisbeed onto his cabin floor. Sat cross-legged on his bed, he reached for another file. A slightly plump and mostly balding white man called Bill had a photo attached too. Percy blinked and could almost smell the beer and fried food wafting off him. He wouldn't trust himself to not turn on the defensive with a man who looked like he did. Too familiar. His file slapped to the floor too. Percy picked up the file of a younger man and tilted his head. This guy Jake didn't seem too bad. He was young, a son of Venus, and didn't look too threatening. It was clear he hit the gym sometimes, but there wasn't a single blonde hair out of place in his picture. Percy could see the two of them getting along, maybe sparring while talking, getting takeout for sessions that ran over. Then he frowned. This guy looked too much like Jason, like Luke, like Apollo. He wasn't looking for an older brother figure, he was looking for a professional. He tossed it. A young woman's file caught his eye. Her name was Angusha. She had a focus on PTSD and was a centurion in the second cohort when she was younger. She looked to be in her late 20s, early 30s. She had a long scar across her cheek. He looked at her photo and, other than seeing her as maybe a slightly older version of Hazel, drew a blank on any doppelgangers. He placed her folder to the side. "Angusha Martin," Annabeth read aloud before skimming the notes underneath. "She sounds good." Percy nodded a little nervously. "Hopefully," he said. "How's yours coming along?" At this, Annabeth frowned and looked away. She plucked a daisy out the grass and flicked it into the distance before rolling onto her side. "I haven't really found the right one," she said. "They all just seem like strangers. They are, so that makes sense, but I just don't like the idea of spilling my guts to someone I don't know. They haven't gone through the same things, they didn't know what it was like. What if I react in a way they wouldn't expect for the scenario? How could they understand when they weren't there?" Percy frowned. Annabeth was raising some very valid thoughts of his own. "I don't know," he said. She narrowed her eyes at him. "But those are my problems," she said. "We're both still going no matter what. If you want to get out of it, get your own excuses." Percy laughed. He wrapped his arms around her, glad that both of their fatting bruises no longer hurt. "Let's just hope we don't want to get out of it," he murmured into her hair. Percy woke from his nightmare with a scream, Damason's name on his lips, his hand still reaching for his friend. He didn't go back to sleep that night. The room was big but not too big, that was good. Huge windows too, very light, floorboards, little statues and things in the room, all very nice. Percy shifted in his seat, awkwardly uncomfortable, riptide digging into his leg, which he was surprised he'd been allowed to keep, though he guessed it was because it didn't work on mortals. Not that that really disarmed him. Why was he thinking that? The leather creaked slightly and he froze. He tried not to move again. Over the coffee table between them, "Angusha, call me Angie," she had said with a smile, didn't bat an eyelid. "So," she began calmly, "here's what I was thinking for this session. If you're uncomfortable with the layout or topics, please tell me and we can change it. I thought we could start with a little chat, setting out expectations and results. Then we could start to address something if you want to talk about it, or simply continue talking. I understand you may not want to start talking with someone you may not trust yet." "Oh," Percy said, "yeah, sounds good." Great, Angusha smiled. So, Percy, what would you like to get out of these sessions? Do you have any goals or problems that you wish to tackle? Well, he scratched the back of his neck. I think I'd like to sleep better, and there are some things I can't really talk about literally that I would kind of like to, and, yeah. Those sound good to me, Angusha replied, nodding. You can add or take off things whenever you want, but we'll handle those for now until you're happy. How would you like to continue this session? We have 50 minutes left. Percy considered it. Angusha was nice enough, he thought, looking her over, but he didn't trust her to be poking around in his head yet. She regarded him with warm brown eyes, completely judgment-free. She looked very professional, but he wasn't ready yet. Maybe just talk, he asked, wincing at his own voice, but Angusha simply smiled, putting down her notebook. Sounds good to me, now I hear you're quite the canoeer. Percy felt a smile tugging at his lips. Wonder why, he asked rhetorically, and her own smile grew wider. As soon as Percy descended the slight decline to the beach, it was like there was a missile targeting system pointed straight at him. Big brother, Tyson bellowed, and the sand began to shake underfoot as he barreled over. Percy grinned, despite the slight jolt at seeing a cyclops run towards him, and opened his arms. Tyson slammed into him a second later, physically lifting him off the ground. He felt tears on his neck soak through his shirt instantly, like multiple water balloons bursting on his skin. Hey, little brother, Percy grinned as Tyson set him down. His brother beamed at him happily. I am so proud of you, you beat Dirt Woman, we won. Yeah, man, Percy shrugged, but I saw you too leading the others. You were large and in charge, bro, I'm proud of you too. Tyson sniffled. We could not have won without you, Daddy said so. Oh, did he? Percy smiled. Tyson wrapped an arm round him, the two of them walking over to the shore before sitting down. The waves were rhythmic and calming. Percy needed that, especially if he was going to do the homework Angusha had set him in their last session. He breathed in. Hey, Tyson. His brother looked at him, big eye blinking. There's something I gotta tell you. Tyson nodded, looking excited. Percy prayed for his ribs. My mum is pregnant, he told him. A beat. Then. A sibling, Tyson cried, pitching forward to practically envelop Percy, who wheezed as his sternum was crushed only a little bit. A third, another. Yeah, man, Percy said, grinning once he could breathe. You're going to be a big brother too now. Tyson blinked. I shall be the second best big brother ever, he said solemnly. Warmth flushed Percy's cheeks. Oh, you big softy you, he said, patting Tyson on his big arm. They stared out towards the horizon. I missed you for so long, Tyson said suddenly. You were there and then you weren't, and Big Brother was gone. Percy felt his heart clench as Tyson's eye overflowed with tears, and he wrapped the Cyclops in a hug as best he could. Hey, I missed you too, buddy, but I knew that when I got back you'd be right there, kicking butt and taking names. Didn't take names, Tyson sobbed. Ah, you don't need them anyway. Kick 'em out the way, they aren't worth your time. Percy poked him in the chest while rubbing his back. You're General Tyson. If they want you to know their name, they take a ticket and get to the back of the line, yeah. Long line, he sniffed. Percy grinned. Longer than a conga line of snakes, he agreed. Tyson giggled. They sat like that for a while, brother's arms slung around brother, just watching their father's domain ripple and flow. Percy felt something in his chest knit back together a little more. Can you recount your dream? No, Percy snapped, packing about the room. You don't wish to think about it, or you don't wish to analyze it. Both neither. I don't get a choice. Angusha tilted her head at him, and Percy felt bad. Then he felt angry that he felt bad, then bad that he felt angry. He practically roared, running his hands through his hair. Can you draw it for me? Angusha asked behind him. He turned around and she slid a piece of paper and some wax crayons over the table. Draw it, he asked incredulously. Angusha simply nodded. You don't have to talk about it or show me, she stated. He found himself nodding. He sank back down into his seat and looked over the crayons. He reached for the red and black ones and almost felt like laughing at the bright blue, green, and yellow crayons. Yeah, right, the paper was the wrong color too. White was never a thing down there, nothing was that clean. He placed the blunt tip on the page before spiking it downwards, leaving a violent slash down the page. Halfway through, he realized. I can't draw, he told her. That's okay, she said. So long as you see what you want, it's all good, Percy. Art is subjective anyway. He blinked at her, then back at the page, before going back to drawing quietly. The stalactites were too triangular, he had colored himself in too red, he didn't know how to draw the face of either of them. The black was a stub by the time he had finished. The red was smeared with black and lopsided from how hard he had pressed. He let them roll back towards the untouched pastel colors and silently pushed the page across the table. Angusha looked it over, then regarded him. A memory or a construction, she asked. Memory. He tapped his fingers on the underside of his thighs before recognizing it and placing them in between his knees and breathing in and out like she'd recommended. Where does this fall on your timeline? Pre-labyrinth, like right before. Fear out of 20. He didn't hesitate. 20. Angusha didn't move a muscle, but that was what gave her away. He felt the blood rush to her muscles to stop them contracting, to stop her from making an expression. She was good, but he had the advantage. 20, she repeated calmly. I thought I was going to wet myself, he said bluntly. I wouldn't be surprised if I did and just didn't notice. Why was it scary? She asked, jotting something down absently. They were only around 8 sessions in, but Percy would kill to be able to see that notepad. She had offered to let him see, but he didn't want her to avoid writing things that might upset him. He didn't want to pull an Annabeth. Her last therapist's notes hadn't gone over well, he'd been told. Oh, right question. I mean, I thought I was going to die. You said before that's regular for you, his therapist questioned. Well, yeah, but this time it was genuine. I knew I was going to die, either by a dysphagia or by falling to my death or having a heart attack from stress or he would have got me. Mr. T, Angusha provided. Percy snorted. Yeah, Mr. T was about to probably eat me alive. His smile cracked a little at the thought before dropping quickly. I hate Mr. T, he said under his breath. Why? Percy laughed humorlessly. He's the embodiment of evil and I pissed him off, and then I didn't finish the job. Right now I just hate him for existing. Percy ducked as a china mug sailed over his head. Whoa, he said, watch it. Annabeth laughed. You shouldn't have been in the way, she said, but angled her next projectile somewhere else. This was a cross between her own idea and her newest therapist's idea. Marina was lasting longer than the rest, but Annabeth still had her doubts about her. She wished she could clone herself to fix herself, but her other self was just as messed up as she was. It would be the blind leading the blind. It was a conundrum. She needed to blow off steam. Hence the crockery smashing. Ha, she said, launching a plate at the big house. It shattered against the stone harmlessly, but the noise and the feeling breathed life into her veins. Veins that hadn't always had life in them. She threw another cup and didn't think about it. Which was why she needed therapy, her mind supplied. Shut up, she responded. How's Marina? Percy asked her, frisbeeing his own plate. Better, she went to Harvard, but that doesn't always mean anything. There are plenty of rich people in Harvard who shouldn't be there. Is she rich? Well, no, but you know what I mean. The standardization is already on the floor, but she's okay. She said this is a good activity to do once. Get it out, but don't rely on breaking things as a crutch. She sounds smart, her boyfriend replied, lobbing a mug so hard that the fragments almost reached the edge of the tarp they had laid down. Is she helping any? Annabeth shrugged. She'd found it hard to open up to strangers, but Marina's no-nonsense approach while grinding on her issue with being bossed around had made it easier to just say things without beating around the bush. Their conversations were very flat, full of short statements, but it was getting easier. She looked at Percy, angry at her jealousy. He had picked a good therapist and had really started smiling more lately. She was happy for him. Why couldn't she do that? Kesna sprinted inside the bar, slamming the door behind her. The music scratched to a halt, the ogre behind the bar giving her a confused look. Kesna, the nearest Scythian Dracena asked, what is it? She could barely get the words out, her hearts were slamming against her chest. She flipped around and scrabbled at the locks until her claws pushed each and every one into place, twisting the final one with a slightly reassuring and firm click. Door was shut, no getting in. No getting out. Casna, a cyclops, waved a hand in front of her face, his drink swaying in his other hand. What is it? She looked around the small bar in fear, and saw the dawning realization on the faces in the booths and on the floor. Godkiller, she choked out. Cards flew into the air on the poker table, pool cues were snapped and handed round, and Impulsi moaned and held her head to her knees. Where? The ogre behind the bar grunted, pulling out a wheat scythe from behind some bottles. Hold on, she said, before slithering over to the door and peeking through the top window. It was pitch black outside, lit only by a flickering street lamp. She could hear the waterfall in the distance and cursed. Oh, why had they built this bar by water? Why hadn't they built it in a desert, or just not in America? Stupid place, she grumbled under her breath. Stupid, stupid. Outside, the streetlight smashed into darkness. She jumped with a yelp, propelling herself away from the door. She span around searchingly and pointed at the biggest cyclops in the room. You, she cried, you do something, you're the biggest here, and he claims a cyclops as his brother, he might claim you too. The cyclops went pale and shook his head. No, he won't, I heard what he did to Daum in the pit, I'm not having that done to me, He seized a squirrely-looking Dracena next to him and shook him. If he tries to do that to me, you gotta kill me, I'm not his family, I'm not going through that. Yeah, I have you, my friend. Cowards, Kesna spat at them, in an attempt to keep her own fangs from clattering together. She went back to the door while the others turned over the furniture, creating barricades against the windows and doors. She nibbled at her claws, it wouldn't stop him. She went over the bar and poured herself a drink. The ogre didn't even stop her. She added a little virgin blood and topped it off with some absinthe. Maybe it would hit her before he did. Clambering onto the top of the bar, she scanned the room. Monsters flurried everywhere, stacking chairs against the windows. Some hid under tables. One at the back had just simply pulled his black hood over his head. She let her gaze flick over them all before lifting her cocktail glass into the air and calling out. Any gods in here? She asked. Everyone slowed and looked around. None, not even Black Hood in the back, spoke up. Ah, she said, that's a shame. Maybe they would have slowed him down, but I suppose we'd all be in the same boat regardless. Kesna chucked her drink back, uncaring of the little dribbles out the sides of her mouth. It burned like the Phlegethon River and she relished it. She'd be feeling that familiar burn again soon enough. This was where the fun began. There has to be something we can do, an Impulsi wailed. I could mind trick him. Not before he kills you, the ogre shook his head. He's too quick. Kesna strained all of her ears. She realized she could no longer hear the waterfall flowing. It was just dead silence outside. She poured another drink. I heard he can move through walls, a particularly exuberant Dracena exclaimed, fueling another wave of panicked mutters. No, he uses doors, doesn't he? He can shadow travel, one piped up. I heard he stops any heart he feels. Even his own, a smaller monster asked, all four eyes wide. The larger one leaned forwards. I heard it doesn't beat in the first place. I heard he traded his life for the daughter of Athena's and Lord Hades uses him as a puppet to destroy the gods' enemies. Wow, fear rolled through the room. No, that's not what I heard. A smaller cyclops at the back piped up, instantly overwhelmed as all eyes turned to him. I heard that the Titans tortured him until he forgot who he was, then the god of the pit took pity on him and trained him. Then he remembered Chase and betrayed him. Another round of gasps and jeers. She watched with a raised eyebrow as the hooded figure stood abruptly, causing silence to fall. It wasn't a cloak as she had thought it was just a hoodie. I heard, the mystery man began before flipping his hood down. Green eyes of death bored into the terrified room, alive with a feral spark. Familiar black stripes ran down his face. He held no weapon, they all knew what that meant. Well, said the godkiller, everything I guess. Kesna didn't even get the chance to run. She heard breaths being sucked in to scream around the room but heard no screams. She tried to move but her legs suddenly weren't hers to control. Her vision whited out with a flick of a hand. It must have only taken a split second, but that split second felt an eternity. Her body was stretched, compressed. Everything on her insides fought to get on her outsides, pushed and pushed and... Pian. Pushed until she burst. Kesna didn't open her eyes, she couldn't, they hadn't reformed yet, but on the inside she sighed. It would be years before she got out the pit again. No, Percy shouted. Yes, Grover shouted back. I won fair and square. Best of 9. Take a dip, goat boy. Grover pouted, Perce, please. Juniper took half my strawberries, not my fault, I'm still hungry. You're always hungry, said Annabeth, and lying next to her on the picnic blanket, Juniper nodded. Strawberry juice lined her mouth. I was born this way and I will not apologize for it, Grover said haughtily before swiping a strawberry from Percy's tub. That's it, Percy shouted, tackling the satyr, and Annabeth watched bemused as the two rolled around the grass, grappling for a strawberry that had now been very firmly squashed against Grover's shorts. Do you think they know? Juniper giggled. Not in the slightest, Annabeth replied. Want a strawberry? She picked up Percy's tub and offered one. Oh yes please. A healthier makeshift popcorn, it was the perfect snack to accompany the view of Percy and Grover, who had now stopped wrestling and were now giggling like children on top of each other. Grover's hoof behind Percy's head and Percy sat on Grover's hand. It was hard to believe this was the same Percy that had relapsed recently. After he had locked himself in his cabin for a few days, the ground shaking periodically, he'd gone straight back to his therapist. He'd been relatively stable after that. Whereas she felt lighter than she had in months. Years, Marina was right. Sometimes she just needed to look at the big picture and leave out the details. The world was okay, they were okay, she was okay. She hadn't dreamed about the underside of that boat in over a week. It was the little things. She would wake up in the morning and smile. Any day she didn't dream was a good day. Which was an absolute Marina was trying to drill out of her, but it was true. She didn't remember being dead, and the memory gap was the thing that bothered her the most. Dying was a blur, though the panic remained clear. She remembered the burn in her throat, but it was the knowledge that for days and days she had just been empty that was what got her. Her body had been carted round and moved and cleaned without her knowledge or consent or anything on the inside that had been her. And then she'd just been thrown back into a dead body. She wasn't rotting or anything, she was in perfect health, everything had been reversed, but still just blackness where memories should be. Had she gone to Elysium, Asphodel, would she get back into Elysium? She didn't know. But regardless of it all, she was happy to be alive. She thanked Percy in her mind every day, and at least she could talk about it now. She'd overtaken Percy in that regard, not that it was a competition, her mind reminded her. She was just grateful for Marina. Tita. Percy threw his head back into the back of the sofa. Angie watched him with her ever-patient eyes, and even her heart was steady. He reckoned she was on to him on that regard. I can't, he said. It's psychosomatic, Angie shrugged. Physically, you have no problem with it. Do you want to try the repetition again? Fine, he sat up. Tarmac is made with tar, she started. Tarmac is made with tar, he repeated dutifully. On fish I have tartar sauce. On fish I have tea tartar sauce. Die immortals, he hadn't been trapped in a sauce, why was he stuttering on that? He balled his fists, then released them and worked on his breathing. Angie took the leap. There's a place in the underworld called Tartarus. He breathed in. There's a place in the underworld called Tartarus, he forced out, practically gritting his teeth. He held his hands out, palms up to the ceiling. I think that's the best we're gonna get, he said. You've made great improvements, Angie said warmly. You've done very well. Thanks, I'll get it one day, he said, and it actually wasn't as far off a dream as it had been so long ago. I believe in you, Angie said with a smile. Come on, slowpokes, Jason yelled at the rest of the group, his voice reverberating through the forest. We're only on lap 2. Jason, I'm about to throw up on my fancy new trainers, Leo groaned. There's gonna be barf all over my laces, so I won't even be able to take them off. They'll call me puke shoes for the rest of my life. Do you want me to carry you? He asked. Leo seriously considered it, but before he could speak, he was overwritten by Piper. If anyone's getting carried, it's me, she said. A run, what were you thinking? It's fresh air, Jason rolled his eyes. Good for you. There's air indoors, Leo moaned. Nothing changes from 1 foot outside the window to 1 foot inside the window. Have you smelled the air in the Hephaestus cabin? Percy asked in disbelief. It's like socks made of hair and metal on fire in grease and McDonald's chips. Leo closed his eyes and breathed in dramatically. It is a combination of the gods. I'm sorry your nostrils aren't as advanced as mine, he said. No, you're just nose-blind, Annabeth said. Your neurons have been smothered in smoke for too long. It was probably true, but she didn't have to say it. He replied in lieu of an actual response. Your palate just isn't as refined as mine. Leo, didn't you say the other day that you've never eaten an onion and never plan to? Hazel asked. Maybe, he replied. Anyways, what was that about a lap too? Right, Jason clapped his hands together. Second one to the finish line wins. Leo wrinkled his nose. Second one. Jason turned round with a smug smile, the slight wind causing his hair to flutter. Show off. Well, we all know I'll be first. Piper and Frank exchanged a look. Oh, you will you? Frank asked. I don't see how that's possible when you still have to redo your laces, Piper said, her voice becoming melodic at the end. Leo watched with a grin as Jason nodded firmly before crouching down and redoing his already perfect laces. Piper and Frank grinned and sprinted off into the distance. Hazel followed with an apologetic tilt of her head. Sucker, Piper threw over her shoulder. He saw Percy and Annabeth share a glance before they ran off too. Sometimes it felt like he was getting to know the both of them from the start. Who they were now was not who they had been when they'd met, stressed and desperate to reunite, and certainly not who they were after the war was over. He looked around, he didn't think any of them were. But that wasn't such a bad thing, he thought, as he tossed a handful of leaves onto Jason's back, sat on a fallen log. They all seemed a lot happier now. Their cuts were scars and their scars were fading. Slowly, but they were all getting there. He placed his foot on Jason's back and shoved him over, then ran away from the indignant cry that resounded behind him with a smile. My name is Percy Jackson, my mother is Sally Jackson, and my father is Poseidon. My girlfriend's name is Annabeth Chase. I survived Tartarus twice and defeated Gaia. Percy looked into his bathroom mirror, hands gripping either side of the sink, and smiled. The spoon clinked delicately against her mug as she swirled the sugar into the tea. Sally tapped it once on the side before lifting it to her mouth for a sip. It was warm and sweet. Sorry, can I just? A waitress appeared nervously at her elbow, hands hovering at her table. Oh, yes, thank you, Sally said, stacking it all onto the biggest plate before handing it over. The waitress took it gratefully with a quirk of her lips. Thank you, she said again. As a former waitress herself, she knew there was nothing worse than the general public. It was a warm day in the little cafe, her uniform looked boiling hot, and she knew that someone could never say thank you enough. She drilled it into Percy, and she'd drill it into the new baby too, she thought, with another sip of her tea and a rub of her stomach. Don't mess with the people who serve you food. She was waiting for Percy to finish another therapy session. He said he'd felt bad leaving her out here to wait, but she didn't mind. It was nice to sit with a cup of tea and simply melt into the background. She got to hear conversations she could use as writing inspiration. She had good food and drink on hand, and the weather was sunny outside. In a buggy near the window, a baby smiled at her, and she smiled back. Across the table, the other chair was roughly jerked out. A rugged-looking fisherman dropped into the spare seat. Sally raised an eyebrow but continued to drink her tea. Hello, she said. Poseidon smiled at her. How's he doing? He asked. A lot better nowadays, Sally replied, catching a bead of liquid with her thumb before it dripped off the mug. Dionysus has finally been helping. Nightmares are less frequent. He speaks clearly of events. He's on sleep medication now, but the plan is to wean him off of it once he's settled down. He seems a lot happier. She observed the man her son would one day grow up to resemble. They had the same hair, same eyes, though Percy now shaved to avoid being a complete mirror image. The memory of him and Paul stood in the bathroom, laughing themselves to death with cuts all over their foamy faces, still brought a smile to her face. And he'd sworn off Hawaiian shirts. She wondered if she should buy one for him as a joke. Good, Poseidon said, sounding relieved. That's good. Olympus. Mostly fixed, trying to just sort things out now. Percy really has shaken things up again. He's good at that, Sally nodded. I'm proud. She finished her tea. So am I, Poseidon said quietly as she lowered her cup to the table. When she looked up again, he was gone. He's your most recurring nightmare, Angie asked, leaning forwards with her notepad. Percy nodded, chewing his lip. Do you think about it more or less when you're awake? She followed up with. Percy frowned, thinking hard. Kind of 50-50, he guessed. In my dreams they're more memories, but when I think about Tartarus, he rubbed a hand over his head as he stammered, breathing in for 10, holding for 10, out for 10. Then he tried again. When I think about Tartarus, I think more about the future, the fact that he's still out there. Angie nodded but then put her notepad down. She sighed. This is a hard concept for trauma survivors who have their abusers still out there, she said, her eyes warm and sympathetic. It's hard to move on from an indefinite end. To acknowledge that sometimes there just isn't a fairy tale ending. The bullies don't move away. The bad guy doesn't go to prison. The monster doesn't die. Survivors feel paranoid and scared. They can't entertain any scenario that doesn't include their abuser returning, finishing what they started, can't let themselves be happy in case it gets taken away again. These feelings are valid, but you can't let them dictate your future. Living in fear of a future scenario holds you back from really living in the present and hopping for the future. What's something you hope for in the future, Percy? Peace and quiet, he offered with a snort. Think smaller. He looked down and racked his brain. Maybe I think I'd like to go swimming with Tyson at some point whenever he's free from the forge. Angie nodded. Sounds lovely. Can you imagine being happy and peaceful in this little section of the future? Yeah, I think so, Percy said, but he chewed his lip as he pictured him and Tyson playing, then the ocean exploding, a giant monster erupting from the depths. Actually, maybe not. I can't always get the worst-case scenario out of my mind. What if something goes wrong? What if something goes completely and utterly right? Percy looked at her before leaning back in his chair and rubbing his face. It'd be a hell of a lot easier, I'll tell you that. Glaring at me won't kill me, you know. Oh, I know, but a guy can dream. Pasiphae laughed. Percy didn't. Chiron's eyes flicked between the two. She sat on the grass on one side of the border, Chiron and Percy on the other, a small tray of drinks between them. Pasiphae gestured to them. I'll take some lemonade if you will, Godkiller, she said. Chiron watched as Percy didn't even move, but the fizzing liquid climbed out of the jug and into a cup. The cup, condensation clinging all around it, then floated over to her. Pasiphae took it out of the air and drained it. She smacked her lips obnoxiously. So, she began, business. I have found myself in quite possibly the luckiest position in the world. Chiron switched his gaze to Percy, who just kept glaring. He decided to intervene. Care to explain? He asked. Pasiphae bared her teeth in a smile at him. I'd love to. See, once upon a time Mr. Steroids here and I made a deal. I won't kill him if he won't kill me. Which you broke, Percy interrupted. Ah, no I didn't, she pointed at him. I told you I wasn't going to kill you, then merely attacked you, then you did the same, but the oath is still in place since neither of us are dead and I don't see either of us breaking it anytime soon. So, asked Percy, and Chiron had to agree. Where exactly was she going with this? I'm the only being you can't kill. No matter what I do, you can't kill me, so let's start talking deals. Deals, Chiron repeated flatly. He could see Percy's hand slowly clenching into a fist and placed his hand on his shoulder. He'd been healthy and in control for so long, he wasn't about to let this witch ruin it. All I'm saying is, I give you a name, you give me a head, I leave everyone you love alone. We're quite the team. No, Percy said bluntly, and Chiron nodded. Good boy. Pasiphae smirked. Oh please, she said, we both know you can't do anything. Percy paused, then laughed. He stood up, dusting his shorts off. His teeth glinted in the lowering sun. You're right, he said, I can't. Chiron felt like rolling his eyes, of course. But she can, he finished. Pasiphae's grin dropped and she launched herself to her feet, torn red dress swaying. She turned. And came nose to nose with a very annoyed daughter of Athena. Chiron sighed. Kids. It was fiddly and he hated it, and it was stupid. Another bead rolled across his cabin floor and under his bed. He spat as far as he could and used the saliva to push it back into his little pile. It was gross according to his girlfriend, but it was funny how she didn't mind it when he was turning out the lights at night without jostling them. At least Nico was on his side. He'd told him it was cool. He may have been making fun of him though. He wasn't entirely sure. Percy threaded another bead on a centaur in a prom dress. How had he been here for years and still never heard that story, and held up the necklace to the light. The little beads clicked together. He placed it on the floor and lined up his necklace, Annabeth's coral pendant and her new necklace. Okay, it was all coming together. The beads he had remade for her were a little smudged and a bit scruffier than they should be, and he'd had to practice his breathing techniques while doing the Empire State Building bead names, but they'd turned out all right. It was getting harder to work in the dim light, especially seeing as how his fingertips didn't really show up in shadows. The black was permanent, it seemed. He'd touched the void and the void had stained him. He wasn't too bothered actually, seeing as how his fingers had been consistently ink-stained for years before he even knew he was a demigod, but his mum had bought him some fancy gloves to wear if he needed them regardless. He wondered what the bead for this year would be, hopefully not him, maybe a little caricature of a dead Gaia. A beep went off on his watch and he jumped. You'd think he'd be used to it by now. Leaning over to his bedside table, he pulled the little orange capsule of pills off the top and popped one in. It wouldn't hit him for half an hour or so, but he'd be a bit drowsy and giggly until then, so he tied off the necklaces and placed them to the side. He'd finish them in the morning. Annabeth would see if she came into his cabin tonight, but he didn't mind. She probably knew he was doing it as soon as he'd asked her for her pendant. Maybe that would be the bead this year, he mused as he slid into bed. A small picture of a pill bottle and a therapist's notepad. The year they all got officially diagnosed with PTSD and got treatment. He still wanted to know what the centaur was doing in a prom dress though. She could do this, Annabeth told herself, she could do this. The water reached her waist and she sucked in a breath. This was fine, she'd been in and out of these waters practically every day since she was 7, she knew them like the back of her hand. Her boyfriend was the son of the sea, he'd protect her if she couldn't. Marina's voice swam into her head. Once you've done it, you'll have done it, she had said, and once you've done it, you'll know you can do it again. It was all right for her to say that, she hadn't run away screaming the last time she tried. She lifted her chin and marched straight up to her armpits in the sea. She clenched a hand around her new camp necklace. It was cold. It's cold, she said aloud. From where he was sat on the top of the calm waves, Percy winced sympathetically. I can try to make it warmer, he offered, but she shook her head. She needed to just get used to it. She let her fingertips sink into the water a little, her arms held high above the surface. She swirled them about a little. She was in charge, she'd be fine, she'd kill anything in these seas and drag it back onto land. Raina had said she believed in her and she held onto that tightly too. She could feel Percy watching her and sucked in a breath before diving under the surface. Everything muted as she submerged. Eyes scrunched closed, she let herself dive deeper a little. Her legs kicked freely, her weightless arms just feeling the water surround her. She poked the sand with her toes, then signaled Percy and gestured to her eyes. Instantly, she felt the water leave her face. It was like she was now wearing a scuba diving mask. She blinked and opened her eyes. The water was clear, if a little green, and tiny schools of fish milled around in the distance. Percy was watching her, just casually breathing in the water, and flashed her a curious thumbs up. She returned it and they grinned at each other. Victory burned powerfully in her veins. She made a note to give Marina the best gift she could think of. She'd done it, death could kiss her ass. Not bad down here, she said, and it echoed around her little air bubble. It has its moments, Percy replied. She held a hand out to him, it's tradition, right? He grinned and swam over to her, and when their lips met she felt like they were kids again. Her hair rose up around them like blonde seaweed, his hand splayed across her back. She could feel his grin on her own. And how did you feel at that time? Angie asked. Honestly, terrified, but I also know they needed me alive, so maybe around 17. He leaned back in his chair and propped his chin up on his hand. Koyos had it out for me because I'd ruined his chances of getting out the first time, and this time too, I suppose. Krios just seemed to have that generic Titan versus demigod hate. That's probably why he didn't knock me about as much. And Koyos. Percy pulled a face. Yeah, he beat me up a lot, he said, his hands moving as he tried to convey his feelings. And time is different in Tartarus, so he'd let me drop, walk out, and then he'd be back in before I even stopped bleeding. And I did beg, because it just didn't stop and I wanted it to. Sometimes I can still feel my face being all broken after a dream. Most likely psychosomatic, but that doesn't reduce how you felt. Psychosomatic pain can hurt just as much as physical. It's why you see some soldiers with canes to walk despite being physically fine. Have you seen a reduction in bad dreams? At this, Percy's face split in a wide smile. Yeah, he said, I actually had just a normal, regular dream the other day. Well, kinda normal. I was back in the Lotus Casino, remember I told you about that. And Grover and I were playing Guitar Hero, but his turned into his reed pipes, so I called him out for cheating, right? And he told me to look down, and I had Riptide in my hands, but it had all the buttons on it. So we were both playing, but without the actual guitars. Angie smiled. I'm glad you're back to normal dreams like that. Percy laughed. I didn't even win. They watched the sunset go down most nights, but there was something different about tonight. The fireflies were a little brighter, the sky more vibrantly orange, the grass softer. The air was cool and curled around their horizontal bodies. The kids back at camp weren't exactly loud, but they could hear laughs and shouts in the distance. Annabeth shifted in his arms to look at him. You okay? He smiled down at her. Yeah, he said, almost surprised. I am you. She nodded, a little smile pulled at her face. Yeah. Good, he replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She let her head rest back on his chest, and they resumed their gazing into the sky. The end. Chapter 69, Alternate Unhappy Ending. Summary. Follows on from the last line of Chapter 66. Not a part of the main story, some people just wanted this. Sorry it took 2 years, Elmau. It's 8,500 words and I only started writing it today, so if there's errors, send me psychic damage. Extreme content warning, read it as dead dove, do not eat in some places for violence and horror. I wanted it to be dark, but it did kinda take a turn. I tried not to be graphic about it, hopefully. AU chapter. Percy. Oh, this is incredible, Koyo said. No, I take it back, this is my favorite one yet. Percy blinked. Again and again he blinked. Koyos watched him from across the cave, Krios poking the fire next to him. His icy blue eyes glinted with glee. Percy stared back before his eyes dropped to his wrists, thickly manacled and crusty with blood. For a moment Percy did nothing but breathe. In and out and in and out. He's speechless, Krios, Koyos laughed, slapping his knee with mirth. Oh, we've really got him with this one. Percy swallowed, his skin registering the intense and familiar warmth like an open flame was hovering uncomfortably close to him. It clogged his lungs, dried out his eyes, pulled sweat from his brow like a monster itself. He heard the crackling of near and distant fires, howls and growls far away outside the cave, the stone under him, the metal biting into him, the gunk and blood that clung to his body like a onesie. He was in the pit. Now Percy took issue with that for several reasons. 1. He had escaped. 2. It was the pit. 3. He had escaped. 4. He had escaped. 5. He had escaped. He couldn't be back here, he had got out, he fought his way out. He raised a hand and ran it over his lumpy, deformed nose, still broken, rebroken, not fixed. Feeling as still as death, Percy turned to Koyos. What have you done? He said slowly. Koyos grinned. I'm the Titan of Foresight. I get visions of the future, possible futures, timelines to never be. I simply shared one with you where I did not get this vision. Percy swallowed thickly. And what a vision it was, Koyo said, shoving Krios' shoulder to get his attention. You should have seen it. That ugly little sword of his. Best we keep that to ourselves, brother, lest we lose an arm. Your arm, that is. He laughed, wiggling Krios' wrist in the air. Krios pulled it back with a frown. So what now, brother? What of the future? Krios asked. Koyo settled down seriously. We must inform Mother of these events, if not, the consequences lead to her imminent death. Krios' eyes popped out of his head slightly. Death. The other Titan nodded, starting to clench his fists in a way that made Percy distantly get déjà vu. Scattered with the boy's sword, lost to the wind, never to rise again, at least this millennia. Their conversation continued as Percy stared, eyes wide but empty. Nothing was real. Annabeth. No, she was alive, right? Was she? When had Hades resurrected her? She was there when he had got out. Will be there when he gets out. He didn't know. But he had lived it, it had felt like a lifetime. One he would never know. Percy felt his heart begin to speed up, his breaths coming out short and fast. He was right back in the middle of the war. Everything was up in the air again, they could win or lose and they just lost the one advantage they had. Him. His future self revolved in his mind. Scarred, murdering war hero responsible for many, many war crimes. Crimes he hadn't committed yet, crimes he remembered committing, crimes he could still commit. He looked at Koyos. He trailed off, lost for words. The last time he saw Koyo's was. By the look in Koyo's eyes, he remembered too. The Titan stood up, the corner of his mouth starting to curl upwards. Krios, I don't think I've actually introduced you properly to our prisoner here. Have you not? Krios looked over bemused. Oh no, are you aware that you are in the presence of the god killer? Koyos asked. Titan killer, giant killer, killer of Gaia, hero of Olympus, threat to the Olympians. I am not, Krios said before his smile dropped. Threat to the Olympians, he repeated. Oh yes, Koyos nodded. In another future one Jackson here will never see again, he added with a nasty smile that stirred something in Percy's chest, a growing ember of rage. They vote on his life, one only swayed by pure luck. Jackson here imagined attacking them and brushed it off. Too much of a coward, content to live under tyranny, but forever branded an enemy after that. He considered defecting? Krios leaned forwards, his interest seemingly piqued as Koyos nodded. I see, he said, pausing for a minute before, brother, come walk with me. Koyos blinked, surprised but acquiesced. Their large shadows lingered in the cave for a few moments after they vanished, leaving Percy alone with nothing but his low-grade panic attack. He was very slowly falling apart. Everything he had done was for nothing. Everything he had lived through, all that he remembered for nothing. Like a dream, wasted time. He felt like his mind was splitting into two, current reality and current not real reality, where he was just asleep with Annabeth. This wasn't fair, gods, he was going to throw up. Percy leaned to the side and retched. Nothing came up. Of course, back to being starved, dehydrated and filthy. He breathed out a juddery breath and tried to pull himself together. He thought about what he had lived, seen and frowned. He couldn't really remember details, he was losing parts of it. Like trying to grab smoke, his dream, his life, his future, it was slipping through his fingers. Percy became grounded in the cold, harsh reality of now. Like the electricity of life was injected into him, Percy sat up straight, wincing at his cracked ribs. He was in the cave with the Titans. He still needed to find the doors of death, he needed to avoid the arena. Percy blinked. That would mean the god of the pit wouldn't meet him again. Hopefully, an unsettling weight landed in his stomach as he thought about reliving that specific experience. He needed to kill Gaia. That meant dipping Adamas in the Lethe again, which meant killing Koyos and Krios, or escaping at least. He focused, trying to shadow travel, but clenched his fists. He didn't know how to do it on command, or even if he could with the manacles on. How was he gonna get out of this? Footsteps interrupted his little panic, and he glared at the Titans walking back in. Decided to settle your bet with Antaeus, he sneered. Koyo smirked. Antaeus, he said, that's the past. We're gonna take you to someone who's gonna rewrite your whole future. In an unfortunate recreation of one of Percy's fading memories, Koyos leaned forwards and grabbed his head with one hand. If she's reformed yet, that is, he said in a low voice, before pulling his head sharply forwards away from the cave wall and then slamming it. Percy's eyes fluttered open and the dim light invaded his eyes like angry scorpions. He groaned and clenched them shut again. You're awake, came a voice in front of him. Even with his eyes shut, Percy inhaled sharply before breathing slowly out. Gods, he almost felt like praying for their help, though they wouldn't hear, wouldn't help anyway, his mind added. Not against her. No, he mumbled dryly, eyes still shut. I'm sleeping, leave a message at the beep. He paused, beep. A long stiletto nail dusted lightly down his face and he shuddered, skin crawling. And here I was thinking you'd still be reforming, he said. Oh, I was, no thanks to you, but Mother sped up the process to have me for the final fight. She thinks I might last longer than Polybotes did in Koyo's vision. A few moments of silence. Percy heard her scorpion tail slide across the ground and remembered Damison's screams with sudden clarity. He was tempted to just keep his eyes shut. What was she gonna do, pry them open? Probably. Camper's breath filled his nose and he retched, eyes opening involuntarily. Gods, it smelled like raw meat on a treadmill made of bloody socks. He locked eyes with the half-dragon half-woman that had killed Bob and screwed up his face. 100 questions ran through his head. The usual, what do you want, what are you going to do, why am I here? But he knew the answers to all those questions. The answer was pain, a whole lot of it. It was probably why he was dangling from the ceiling by his manacles, feet barely scraping the ground. He glanced around the room, if you could call it that. It looked sort of like the inside of a geode. Like if you cut an amethyst open perfectly in half, gems and rocks sticking out in perfect points on the ceiling, walls, and floors, but instead of a nice purple shade. It seemed the interior decorator of this particular room had liked the exterior, aka the pit, so much that they'd just recreated it on the inside. Glassy black rocks glinted at him from every rounded corner. The room was so dark that Percy's main source of light were Camper's glowing green eyes. It was also oddly cool, bordering on cold, and the air was thick like it was made of dust. There was only one wall that was different, and that was the one with the extremely thick-looking metal door with a big, all bolt that Percy was sure was about to be his biggest nemesis. Excluding the one talking to him, that is. "Do you know where you are?" Camper hissed at him, blinking sideways like a reptile. "The pit," Percy hazarded a guess. "Not just the pit," Camper bared her teeth in what could have been interpreted as a smile. "The bottom of the pit. The caves at the bottom of the caves, where light is not just scarce but impossible. You are miles under the surface of the pit, in a veritable labyrinth of tunnels and mazes." Percy breathed in the weird dust air. It clogged his throat. "I used to live here," Camper whispered to him, "before your father and your uncles invaded and stole my prisoners. Before they ruined my reputation as jailer and took away my only source of happiness." "What torturing briars," Percy scoffed, but Camper just nodded. "His screams and his siblings' screams, they were like music to me. Torture is an art form. I am an artist. I can take the strongest hecatoncheir and shape it into a wailing mess. Is that not creation, destruction? Is it not art?" "I prefer paints. You should try them instead," Percy said, glancing around his cell, he supposed. This was where Briars and the Giants and the Cyclopes were kept a millennia ago, tortured by Camper for all those centuries. He found he didn't quite want to be here. Camper, as if sensing his train of thought, slithered over to him. "And now it's your turn," she hissed almost gleefully. Percy felt what little blood he had left drain out of his face. "Become a demigod hero," they said. "It'll be fun," they said. "My turn?" he asked in a monotone voice. "Koyo's vision changed things," said Camper, "and Mother agrees. If you were close to joining us last time, imagine what you could do if you were just pushed a little further." As she spoke, her scorpion tail slowly rose behind her, and Percy watched it with wary eyes, knowing the poison was, as Damieson had once put it, the closest thing to living death. "Well," he spoke quickly, "you've convinced me. I'll join. We can sign some papers on the surface, no need for anything down here. Just let these chains off me and we can have a nice business proposition meeting. You should have tried that first. Most normal people would just ask first, you know." Camper's tail plunged into his shoulder, and Percy burst into flames from the inside. Like acid in his blood. He couldn't breathe in, couldn't breathe out, couldn't breathe at all. Percy threw up and the bile burned his cheek, neck, chest. Every bone in his body was surely fighting to escape, poking tents in his skin, tearing through like knives, leaving him little more than a skeleton. His eyes rolled back in his head again and again. Why wasn't he falling unconscious? Why was he alive for this? What was happening? He had to be dead. He hadn't breathed in days, his chest was splitting. He was tied to the Salem poles and set ablaze. He was held underwater and made to hold his breath. He was slowly peeled of all his skin and had jagged nails scratched down his blood-pouring arms. All at once. The first time Percy awoke with at least enough coherency to actually complete a sentence in his mind, he had one thought and one thought only. To never have that happen to him again. His head lolled on his shoulders, drool sliding out his mouth with little control. He could drool, he thought dimly, he'd allow himself that little luxury. "Back with us?" Camper's voice made his ravaged body jump feebly, unaware that she was in the room. "Briars used to recover from that in half the time. I was unaware you were that weak." Percy choked out, his tongue fat and sluggish in his mouth. "He has about 98 more arms than me." "For now," Camper grinned, and Percy felt fear curl up into his chest. "Need arms to fight? Ask Gaia," he mumbled. "Gaia told me one thing when you were given to me," Camper said, leaning in. She told me to break you down as far as you would go and build you back up to the god killer, ready and willing to fight for her. Percy mustered a feeble glare. I've been told that I'll be broken more times than you could know, hasn't stuck so far. Camper's tail loomed over him like a snake charmed out a pot. Percy breathed faster. So far, agreed Camper. Wait. No. Convulsing like a puppet on a string. Make it stop, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. He was going to die. Drenched in sweat. Something sweet in his mouth, his mother's cookies. Mum, he called raggedly. Harsh laughter. He recoiled like a wounded animal. Pain again. His head was going to explode surely. Consciousness hit him like a truck again. He felt like he'd been tied to a treadmill for weeks. Every part of his body radiated nausea and exhaustion. Hades, he felt dried salt around his eyes, blood around his teeth, his nostrils, ears. His throat was raw, which was odd considering Percy didn't remember screaming. So this was what Damason had experienced. No wonder he'd been quiet for a bit afterwards. Percy hadn't felt anything more impossibly excruciating in his life. You're awake again. Percy's breathing quickened before he even registered what was going on. Camper, he looked at her. Did she sleep in here? Was she always with him, sat in the near pitch-black darkness just watching? Her tail twitched and Percy found himself jerking away as far as he could. No, he spoke without thinking, not again. Good idea, Camper said, nodding. What kind of master torturer would I be if I just repeated all my best moves? Variation matters. Percy felt he would soon regret opening his mouth. He regretted it. Blood pouring down his body to drip off his shoes, regretted it. He couldn't even be reflective, couldn't get inside his head and zone out. Camper was good, she didn't let him get used to anything, not blood, not burns, not bruises. Not poison. The poison affected him the most, made his brain foggy, made him forget. This was how all escape plans that the giants made were thwarted, Camper told him as she pulled out his fingernails. They forgot they had plans in the first place. Percy understood. He could smell his hair burning. Smelled better than skin. He had been alive for eons, he had suffered for eons. He didn't even know that there were new kinds of pain he had never experienced before. He just knew he wanted it to stop. Cuts and bruises were fine, he had experienced them long before going to camp. It was the poison that got to him, inescapable. It burned his bones black and he couldn't stop it. He couldn't stop it. He couldn't stop it. He was never going to be rescued. No one knew he was here. No one would come save him. This was it. He couldn't talk his way out, couldn't fight his way out, couldn't scream his way out. Gods. This was the rest of his life facing him. And with that, a little part of Percy died. There were no lights, no sun, no moon, no stars. No way to measure how long he had been having things done to him, again and again and again and again. It never ended. He felt older than his mother. Older than his father. His body wasn't his anymore. Things just happened to it. It wasn't him. He was inside. She kept trying to pull him out to the inside. He worried it was working. He didn't know why he was here anymore. Was he a prisoner of war? Was the war still happening? What was life like without pain? Percy laughed. He laughed and laughed and laughed. He'd forgotten What had he forgotten? He laughed harder and forgot why he was crying. Poison, he murmured, poisonous poison, venomous venom, poison or venom. Was she venomous or poisonous? The fumes of it knocked him out. Camper, he called Camper. What? She snapped right in front of his nose. He didn't know she was there. He burst out laughing and forgot what he was going to say. Do you remember the gods banishing you here? Camper asked him one day. One day, once upon a time, like a fairy tale, like Cinderella, like a glass shoe, like Nikes, like Nike, like Rome, like Annabeth. Annabeth, he croaked and began to cry. Do you remember the gods banishing you down here? Camper asked him a minute or a month later. No, he mumbled, I had to. Camper's tail sank slowly into his stomach. No, she said firmly. Before the white fire in his blood began to dissolve him, they banished you here. He didn't know what to do, and he didn't know why he was here, and he didn't know. Why this happened to him, and he didn't know, he couldn't remember. What are you doing? Percy said distantly one day. What? Why aren't you happy being nice? Why did the gods banish you down here? Percy frowned. They did, he said slowly. Wrong. Why did the gods banish? Why? I don't know, Percy hyperventilated. I don't know, I don't remember, please, I don't remember, I don't know. Camper crouched down. Why was he on the floor, and held him by the throat? They saw you as a threat. They killed your friends and replaced them with imposters. They threw you in here to be killed. They didn't expect you to fight for Gaia instead. Gaia. She will save you, Perseus. Save me. Yes, just not for a while. Percy silently continued crying. Why? They were scared of me. Gaia. She will save me. Your friends. Dead. That sounds like a question. Your friends. Dead, all gone. He was all alone, and they weren't real anymore. They were imposters, and he would never see them again. The gods. They saw me as a threat, so they threw me down here thinking I would be killed. You weren't killed. No, I'm being made stronger. Why? So Gaia will save me. Why should she save you, Perseus? Because I will serve her. Camper was gone. Perseus, he looked around nervously. He couldn't remember being alone like this before. Had he done something wrong? Had he answered wrong? Because he knew the answers. He knew what to say. He knew what to say to make the pain stop, just for a heartbeat, just to breathe. He was a threat. The gods wanted him dead. Gaia would save him and he would serve her. His friends were dead. Even Annabeth. He cringed, curling up into a ball. Yes, she had to be dead too. She was safer that way, couldn't be hurt, couldn't ever be in a place like this. He loved her. He loved that she was dead. He loved that she was safe from something like this. The gods killed her. Did he fight them or thank them? He wished they had killed him too. Why hadn't they? Was he truly so terrible to deserve this instead? He was still alone when the door swung open. Scuttling back like a beaten animal, he backed himself into a corner, the jagged edges of the walls slicing through his skin like a hot knife through muscle. He winced but didn't dare move. The door had been open for a long time now. Tentatively moving one limb at a time, he crawled towards it. He had never been outside his cell. It was the same outside as inside. Tunnels, he never knew that. Was this Gaia coming to save him, the gods coming to kill him, Camper coming too? He began to wander. It was like a maze, he thought, didn't know where he was going, didn't know the way back. Happy to wander, better than. He wandered. His stomach growled and he hunched over, running his fingers over the concave surface. He needed food. All the demigods were dead, they were all imposters. He knew these were facts, so when he ran into a two-legged humanoid monster in a purple SPQR t-shirt, he was a little confused. Oh gods, the thing shrieked when it saw him, gods above. I know what you are, Percy said with unwavering certainty. The imposter blinked. Oh gods, you're a demigod. Were you taken to what? It looked him over with a hand over its mouth. What have they done to you? I am being made stronger, Percy replied automatically. What? It looked at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was for talking to it. Was he allowed to talk to it? Fear spiked through him. He couldn't be seen talking to it. Gods, I'm hungry, the thing said. Percy snorted, then he giggled, then he laughed, full-blown belly laughs. Hungry, it didn't know hungry. It was backing away from him, and Percy stilled, not liking that. He was supposed to kill these imposters, right? Were they made of meat? He'd eaten monster meat. He'd eaten all kinds of meat. Are you made of meat? He asked curiously. What? The thing backed away again. Are you? Percy said, nervous of repeating questions. Yeah, I don't know what. Percy threw himself at it. Meat. Meat was food. Percy was so hungry. It fought him off, knocking him down, seemingly possessing super strength. Definitely not a demigod. Else he would be the same strength as him, Percy thought, his stick-thin legs shaking as he got back up to pursue the fleeing thing. Was he allowed to eat the imposters? They were just meat, right? He ate meat. Monster meat was meat. All meat was meat. He just had to wait for it to slow down. It ran fast, but didn't know the tunnels like Percy did. Percy knew his lefts and his rights and his ups and his downs. He didn't know the way out or the way back to his cell, but he knew different sized rocks and the bloody arrows he had painted on everywhere, leading him in a big circle to wander in. He knew that if he stayed still, it would be easier to find it when it slept. So Percy stood and waited. He was good at that. When he himself felt like dropping, his head foggy and dizzy, his tummy making unpleasant noises, he moved on. He knew a left and a right, and if he lifted his hand above his head an inch, he could feel the ceiling divots tell him where to go. Could feel a mass of blood slumped round the corner, but he wasn't meant to, else the manacles would go back on. Percy turned the corner, crouched next to the imposter monster, and bit into the thing's neck. He made sure to hold on tight even when the thing started to shriek and flail. He dug his sharp little teeth in tighter, even though it hurt in the places where he didn't have any anymore. Tasted like meat, he thought, swallowing the rapidly filling mouthful of blood. He pulled his head back, peeling a strip off, and began to eat it. It tasted raw and chewy. The thing, pretending to be a demigod, still making an alarm-like noise, staggered up and round the corner. Percy was content to just chew. He felt it drop 2 tunnels over and knew it wouldn't be getting back up. That was fine. He would go get it. More imposter things started to appear in the tunnels. Had the gods cast them down here too? Were they not doing a good enough job pretending to be demigods? He had sympathy for them, but not enough to stop hunting and eating them. He was getting stronger, he thought, or the things were getting weaker. He could take one down in one tackle now and keep it down with a well-placed chomp. He felt like a cool lion that he could have maybe seen in a nature documentary once. He couldn't quite remember. He liked to think that he had seen it with Annabeth once. That was really the only name he had left at this point. For some reason, he couldn't quite let her go. Even though she was dead and rotting and murdered by the gods, he knew she was in Elysium. She was a good person. He didn't quite remember her or what she looked like, but he knew she was part of him. He hoped she would be impressed with his new hunting skills, that he was getting big and strong again. For the first time, he didn't know. He guessed he was big and strong before, else why would the gods think him a threat? He chewed on some ribs quietly for a moment and pondered what they thought he could do. The tunnels got smaller. It was only when he was consistently bumping his head into the ceiling that he noticed. First he had to hunch. Then crouch. Then crawl. He learned these new tunnels too, landmarked by every time he had encountered another imposter and left puddles and sprays of blood everywhere and piles of vomit from where the claustrophobia became too much. It was darker too. Some days he could barely see his hands. He imagined himself being ironed out like a shirt by the ceiling and floor. He hoped it would be quick and not a slow crushing. That didn't sound nice. The bones piled up, the tunnels became shorter, Perseus panicked more often. But it was better than before. He had answered good, and this was his reward. He got open space to crawl and all the meat he could eat. He no longer spoke to the imposters. It wasn't as if they could see him in the darkness anyway. By the time they stopped panicking about being stuck in a tunnel, Percy was already angling his head towards their throat. This was luxury. He had earned this. He deserved this. He prayed to Gaia every night that no one would ever take it from him. He was happy to be alone. Happy to shred his palms and knees to the bone as he ran on all fours. Happy to pick the bones clean. Sometimes he reassembled them into what he thought the imposters really looked like. Legs sticking out of ribs, arms growing through eye sockets. They were odd looking if they looked like that. It made him more relieved to eat them and get rid of them. How far away was Elysium? If these things got out, they could go across the underworld, climb up and infiltrate it. They could hurt Annabeth. Better he deal with them. Sometimes he used the bones as weapons if the ends were particularly sharp. The movements were easy. It was like his body already knew what to do with it. Sometimes he remembered using a sword and... He woke up back in his cell one day, once upon a time, once in a blue moon. There was a woman in there. She had brown hair and brown eyes and brown skin and was very pretty. She smiled at him. Percy, unaware of how to respond, bared his bloody teeth in an imitation. It made her smile more, so he guessed that was the right response to give to her. Hello, Perseus. Talking, yes he could. He nodded instead and hoped he wouldn't be hurt for it. "My name is Gaia," she said, and Percy's eyes flew open wide. "You are here to save me?" The words felt clunky, his tongue unused for anything but eating, but he felt the meaning in his bones. Saved, no more pain, he would serve. "It depends," Gaia said. Percy cocked his head to the side in desperation. His breathing came out frantic. What did he have to do? What had he done? "Are you angry, Perseus?" she asked. Angry, Percy thought about his blood-covered body. He thought about the pale white skin underneath with ice-white scars littering every part of it. He thought about how he got those scars and then dug his long fingernails into his wrist to stop thinking about it. "Maybe," he responded, unsure of what answer she wanted. He had never been asked this question before. He didn't know the answer. He hadn't been given the answer. Gaia hummed in response, "Because I would be angry if I were you." Percy scrambled to answer. "Yes," he exclaimed. "Yes, I am angry. I can be angry. I'm angry." Gaia observed him. He trembled from head to toe in desperation for her to understand. "I think you're scared," she said, standing up, and Percy began to hyperventilate. "I think you're not the angry monster I requested. I think you're a scared animal. That will have to be rectified." Percy threw himself at her feet, his body shaking like he was convulsing, large tears streaming down his face, cutting white stripes through the thick, flaky layer of red blood. "No," he begged. "Please, please, please, I can be angry. I'll do anything. Please, please save me. Please save me. I will serve. I'll serve. I serve Gaia. I'm sorry, please." Gaia looked at him with soft disdain, then left, locking the door behind her. Percy stared at the door. His eyes were wide, jaw trembling as he bared his teeth again and again. Volts of electricity shot through his entire body. And he ran to the door, bodily slamming into it, and stuck his arms through the bars at the top to claw wildly, spitting in fury. "No," he roared, an insanity he had never felt before overtaking him. "No, come back, get back here." He screamed, tearing at his own skin and smashing his head into the door over and over again until red wept down his face. He felt the warmth through the paint-like coat already there. "Get back here," he screamed. "Save me. She said you'd save me. She said you'd save me. She said you'd save me. Get me out of here. Get back here. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. I'll tear you apart." "There's the anger I was looking for," a voice behind him said. He was already sprinting towards the noise before he registered it was Gaia. He continued, leaping teeth first at her throat. He sailed through her like she was a ghost and banged into the wall behind. Crouching on all fours like a feral dog, his chest heaved in rage. "What is this?" he screamed. "This is your rescue, Perseus," Gaia said, and Percy felt tears burst from his eyes in confusion. "I'm here to save you." Camper returned a mere few minutish hour seconds later. Gaia had said nothing since, and Percy was retching on the ground, half sobbing, half laughing. "You're efficient," she said to her daughter, who visibly flourished. "Thank you, mother, he's my best work in a millennia." "Take him to the surface," Gaia said, gesturing to him. "Take him to the doors, develop his anger and fighting. Let him retake the moniker of Godkiller and then join me on the surface at Camp Half-Blood. Make him do the sacrifices and I will rise to join the war. We have nearly won, let us make sure we continue to." Camper nodded, and the image of Gaia flickered out like a candle. Another thing not real, Percy thought, pulling at his hair. It had grown back since the last time it was burned off, he thought. It had been burned and it had grown back many times. "To the surface we go," Camper said, a palpable aura of excitement around her. "Come." She turned and left. Percy, somehow both wishing desperately to be alone and to never be alone again, hesitated before following her, hovering at the door briefly. He saw her tail whip out of sight and scampered towards it, always staying just behind her. Somehow, she led him through a tunnel he didn't know. Had it existed before, he would have found it, surely. He knew every inch of those blood-splattered tunnels. He knew every decaying skeleton in there. How had he missed this one? This one led up and up and up, and the air got warm to warmer to hotter, and it made his skin crawl, and he cringed away, and he looked up. For the first time he could remember in a long time, a big black sky hung above him. Spotted with lazy red clouds and the occasional jagged stalactite, it was beautiful. The fires dotted about made the whole place a bit bright though, for someone who had been crawling around pitch-black tunnels for the last. It was a bit too much and he squinted. "Come," Camper said to him, gesturing with her arm. The snakes in her hair watched him. He nodded to them. He went to stand by her. Was she his friend? She had taught him everything he knew. She helped him by giving him the right answers, like a cheat sheet in a test. "Where are we going?" he asked quietly, energy still running through him like a drum beat. He was hungry again. "Here," Camper said, and she was handing him a pen. "A pen." "This," Percy frowned. "This is a pen," he snapped at her. Camper stared at him like he was stupid. Percy bristled and uncapped the pen, checking to see if he could use the point as a weapon and the entire thing elongated into a long bronze sword. "Oh," Percy said, a name dancing on the edge of his memory. "Your other swords have been repossessed," Camper said. "Your homemade one will be destroyed. Gaia has no need for something like that. If she wants her son to have a new weapon, she knows how to make it. Now hurry, Mother says the doors are close somewhere, but that's still a fair journey." "Riptide," Percy said, a low anger simmering in him. "Its name is Riptide." "Congratulations, I will drag you." Percy walked. They walked. "Test it out," Camper encouraged as they came across a small group of cyclopes. "Kill them or I'll let them kill you." Percy preferred one of those options. He sidled up to them and sank Riptide through one of their stomachs before it even noticed him. It turned to gold dust and something in Percy recoiled. Where was the food? He couldn't eat gold dust. "Where's the food?" he yelled, seizing a cyclops by a tusk sticking out of its jaw. It whined and Percy slashed through it with a scream before laying into the rest of them. When he stood dusted in gold powder, chest heaving, his rage didn't dissipate. "Where's the food?" he snarled, leveling Riptide at Camper. "You killed monsters, you fool," Camper said. "Only mortals are edible for you, or gods. I think there's a god over there somewhere," she said, gesturing in the distance. "Good. Good. Food." Percy set off, his feet stamping behind him. He walked faster and faster until he was sprinting, his bare feet so scarred and calloused that he barely felt the stones beneath him. He laid into monsters that crossed his path with a vengeance that was increasingly fueled with desperation when they vanished. He was hungry. Why all kill and no food? That wasn't how it worked. He ran. He killed. He massacred his way through crowds, desperate for something to bite, to chew, to stop the gnawing pain in his stomach. Eventually, Camper informed him that he could control blood. He tested it out by exploding her from the inside. She was right. Food, 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 food. He could eat immortals. He found one with a silver scythe and pinned him to the ground, taking a deep bite from his face. Gold, burning hot gold, poured down his throat and Percy breathed out in relief, chewing whatever the bucking and howling god was made of. He pulled parts of his body off and ate them one by one slowly, until the god was nothing more than a head. He left it and continued his hunt. 6 gods and countless monsters later, Percy remembered that he was supposed to go the doors of death or something. He was supposed to. A monster caught his eye and Percy sprinted, slicing through it in one powerful stroke. He laughed in glee, setting his eyes alight before the fury descended again. Were these the doors? He had slaughtered everything he had seen in his path for a very long time. All monsters had been heading this way. There were big doors. Very big doors. Maybe there was food on the other side. He barged his way through the crowd and was surprised when they all pulled away from him, backing into shadows. Mutterings and mumblings filled the air. Too many. Percy uncapped Riptide and bared his ichor-soaked teeth. If he thought the pit was bright, Percy was completely unprepared for the brightness of Camp Half-Blood, which was odd considering he hadn't come out the doors there. He frowned. "Where is Camper?" Gaia asked, suddenly a face in the dirt next to him. Percy shrugged. Had she brought him here, where was the food? "Are you hungry?" Percy nodded rapidly, tapping his fingers repeatedly against his legs. In the cool air, his skin felt sticky and like it was covered in clay. He couldn't remember what it was like to not have red skin. "I have food for you. Go to the edge of Camp Half-Blood and you will find 2 demigod imposters. Kill them." Food, Percy murmured, before turning and walking in a direction he couldn't explain but knew to be the way. He found a couple groups of monsters along the trees near the barrier and steadily massacred them. It was easy, it was fun, but he was hungry. He turned to go into camp but was perplexed when the barrier turned hard and blue under his fingertips. No monsters allowed, he guessed. That was when the thing popped up. "Greetings, Jackson?" A weird demigod lookalike got in his face with blonde hair and a smug face. "Long time no see, good to see that you've chosen the right side. With you the godkiller I here on our side and I the Pontifex Maximus." Percy leaned in and bit into his neck, pulling out a chunk to eat. The boy blinked but mud quickly filled back in the gap missing. "What was that?" he asked. Percy chewed but the meat turned to mud in his mouth. He furrowed his brow and spat it out. He looked to the boy with rage in his eyes, lifted him in the air by his blood and exploded him. Weird mud boy, not made of meat, inedible. "Aha there." Two demigod impostors sat tied to a tree just outside the border. He wandered over. "Percy," one of them exclaimed in horror, their eyes roving his bloody body. "Oh gods, what happened?" "This is Percy Jackson," the other asked with shock, their purple top rippling in the breeze. "This thing?" "Yeah," the other curly-haired one replied. "Come on, Aquaman, let us out. I think they're planning to sacrifice us. We need to help the others." Percy walked closer to them. He knelt down, lifted the Greek one's chin, and finally got some decent food. He didn't listen much to the wet gurgling of one or the screams of the other. He sat there as he ate and thought about what was going to happen. He knew the facts. The gods saw him as a threat. They had put him in the pit. They had killed every demigod and replaced them with copies, and Annabeth was safe somewhere. As he started his second course, angrily tiring of the wailing, he considered how to eat an Olympian. They weren't like minor gods. They may be harder. There was really only one way to find out. What if they put him back in the pit? A kind of furious fear pooled in his stomach, and Percy took more aggressive bites, tearing strips and chunks into his hands just to hold. He couldn't do that again. He'd request, or he'd bait them into doing it. Anything to just die. Percy walked up to the barrier, ignoring the shaking of the earth, and was surprised when his hand went through. Did it really depend on the meat in your system? Had he hallucinated it before? Was he somehow less of a monster now? He glanced at the stripped skeletons behind him. Maybe he'd just taken out some imposters. Maybe that counted for something good. Maybe the gods wouldn't banish him again. He saw the demigod army around the same time they saw him. He heard shouts of his name, watched as several imposters and a centaur ran to him. He'd just eaten. Could he manage more? He took out Riptide and uncapped it. They all slowly fell to just a couple steps in front of him, their happiness no longer loud and visible but frowns and questions, gestures up and down his body still dripping in fresh blood. A ginger imposter stepped closer than the others and Percy sighed. Next course. He lifted his sword and slashed it. It went right through her. Like a hand through smoke. She was unharmed. But everyone around him drew out their swords. "Percy," the ginger spoke up, "what was that?" "Why do you not die?" Percy asked. Wrong thing to say apparently. A pretty blonde imposter leveled a gold sword at him. "What are you?" she asked, gray eyes sparking. Percy's stomach growled. "Hungry," he complained. One imposter came closer. This one was smaller with dark hair and a skull ring. "Percy, whose blood is this?" it asked. Percy furrowed his brow, questions making him uncomfortable again. He lashed out with his sword, the imposter barely having enough time to parry with its own sword, an iron one, more outrage from those around him. His skin crawled at the noises and he blocked them out, striking the dark imposter again. He could remember the name of who this thing was supposed to be impersonating. It was right on the edge of his memory. A horse's whinny caught him off guard, an unfamiliar sound, and he was pushed back several paces as a centaur intervened. "Percy, what's wrong? What are you doing?" the centaur asked desperately. "He's doing as he's told." The voice floated across the yet untouched battlefield, and everyone looked over to see Gaia. "No," an imposter with choppy hair said, "she isn't meant to rise yet." "The sacrifices have been made," Gaia's sonorous voice boomed, "courtesy of Perseus here." Percy didn't know what was going on, he just wanted food. As if reading his mind, Gaia gestured and a monster shoved a demigod imposter through the barrier, tied up and blindfolded. "Come, Perseus," she said smugly, "dinner time." Percy blinked before making his way over to the food. He heard shouts and implorations at his back. None of it meant anything to him. He sat at Gaia's feet before biting into the imposter, savoring the feeling of a full stomach. A lot of screams and yells seemed to follow him eating. Percy didn't understand it, but so long as he wasn't being hurt and could eat, life was good. Flashes of lightning shot through the sky, the smell of a sea breeze, shadows flickering. Percy looked up as he chewed to see the gods appear, their horrified eyes focused on him. "Yeah, they didn't think you'd escape, did they?" He smiled through bloody teeth at them. "Dionysus," he heard Zeus shout, and sure enough, Mr. D came into view. "Perseus," a soft voice came from the tree's side. Percy turned and blinked as the Lady Nyx stood in the shadows. She looked at him with something like pity, disgust, disappointment he didn't know or care. "Sister," Nyx spoke up to Gaia, "this has gone on far enough. You have committed atrocities today. Talk with me." "About what?" Gaia said disdainfully. Percy zoned out and pulled the arm off the meat to chew further. Eventually, after some loud words that made him wince, the two disappeared in a wild tempest of fighting shadow and dirt. People hurried over to him, this time keeping their distance. Gods were there. Percy swallowed his mouthful before mumbling under his breath. "Are you banishing me back to the pit again?" he asked before nibbling on the bone. Silence. He didn't make eye contact. "No," Zeus spoke. "Again?" asked Hades. "What do you mean again?" "I threatened you. You cast me into the pit. The gods killed the demigods and replaced them with impostors. Gaia saved me. I will serve." Percy rattled off his list of true statements and glanced up to see looks of horror from every angle. "Dionysus," Poseidon asked. The closest god knelt down to look at him. He poked him and Percy lashed out with his spare arm, knocking him down to the ground. The god dusted himself off and stood up. "Oh, insane, absolutely insane, tortured into insanity at a guess," he said. Percy heard sobs and murmurs. He snorted to himself, then laughed, and pulled off another arm. "How many demigods has he?" In his eyes, none, but at a guess, "I have no idea, more than a few, I'm guessing." "Fix him." "It's more complicated than that. If he's insane, then you fix him, that's how you work." "Annabeth, there is a good chance that removing his insanity could cause him to go insane again at the memories, I mean." Percy felt a hand clasp the back of his head and turned, biting into the skin of the god. Ichor flooded through his teeth. The god yelped and retreated. "Yep," he said, "pure insanity, tortured for a long time. This has to have been Camper. I recognize the work of her poison. Works very well in slowly depleting the brain. And I think some kind of enclosed captivity. There's a kind of claustrophobia, fear of light type thing. My best guess is to make him an animal. They treated him like one, kill or starve." "Gods. Fix him." "Fine's your funeral. You want your cannibal boyfriend to gain the ability to think. You get what you get. Bada bing, bada boom." The world exploded into color. Percy blinked several times. "Hey." Breathed in. Breathed out. What was that taste in his mouth? What was on him? Percy looked up at Annabeth and locked eyes with her. "Annabeth," he said. He looked at his hands. They looked like he'd plunged them into a bucket of blood. "What?" he began. And then the memories came flooding in. Camper peeling the skin off him and poisoning him, living like a psychopath rat in the tunnels, killing everything that moved in the pit, eating those demigods, trusting Gaia. Percy's hands began to shake. "Oh gods," he murmured. He stared at the partially stripped body next to him and finally recognized the disgusting scent in the air as both fresh and rotting meat. He suspected one of them was him. He turned to the side and threw up. It was pure red meat coming out. "What have I done?" he choked out in between retches. "Percy," Annabeth asked, but he was already shaking his head. What had he done? What had he become? He was a cannibal, a murderer, a psychopath. Guy had risen. He had nothing to fight her with. He didn't have the sword for Annabeth's life. They couldn't win this war. He looked at Dionysus, his breaths coming short and fast. "Kill me," he croaked, "kill me or give me my insanity back." "No," he heard Jason shout, but his splintered mind was halfway there already. Dionysus shook his head. I should have never taken it away, he said. It was needlessly cruel. No one should have to cope with those memories, let alone you, Jackson. Wait. Stop. Dionysus laid a hand on his head, and Percy wandered. The fields of asphodel were nice. Lukewarm, not too dry, not too muggy, comfortably dark, little noise, black grass, stunted black poplar trees, and some fallen stalactites. Percy didn't remember much about his life. All he remembered was that that was a good thing. He smiled and wandered over to a nearby tree.